You ever play a game and fall head over heels in love with it and just wish it would never end? In those cases, it makes sense you'd want to experience every last thing the game has to offer. But sometimes that's what turns a dream game into a never-ending slog. I refer to them as 100% nightmares. Otherwise phenomenal experiences you'd recommend to anyone, as long as you don't let any completionists get their grubby mitts on it. One such example of this is Dragon Quest IX. Now, it's a game I hold dearly, and have played through at least 4 separate times over the years. But the more I look into it, I find myself increasingly thankful I never tried to 100% it. So, what all does it take? Well, conveniently, the game breaks completion down into easily digestible achievements, called Accolades. That's what I'll focus on in this video. There's 444 accolades in the game. Only 412 can be achieved with a male hero, and 413 with a female. So if you're the world's biggest stickler for completion, you can fail a 100% save by playing as a dude, since it technically yields one less accolade. The remaining 31 are just flavor text for how you beat the main campaign, and you can only get one per save file. They range from killing few or many monsters, speedrunning or slowly beating the game, not dying once or dying lots of multiplayer, quest clear counts, grotto clears, and more. So let's go through my list of the worst accolades from what I see as easiest to hardest in a tier list. I'll also try and suggest strategies for clearing each entry, in part to help, and also to illustrate why it's so difficult. If you know a better strat, leave a comment. And yes, I'll go on some tangents. Sue me. Please don't. Wiping out 100 times isn't going to happen naturally unless you're exceptionally bad at the game. But if you are, then why are you 100%ing this game? Apart from that, it's just annoying. The fastest way to do it would be going to a late game area with just the hero as a low-level vocation with no equipment, and throwing yourself against enemies. If you forget to do this before progressing into the late game and maxing class skill points, this will take even longer due to hundreds of extra max HP and resilience since you're always stuck with the hero in the party and skill points are permanent. Conducting alchemy 2,000 times isn't hard, but it is remarkably tedious and impractical to boot. Even though you can create up to 9 of an item at a time in alchemy, it only counts for conducting alchemy once. So I hope you like this animation enough to watch it 2,000 times. Then also sit through the input delay that follows it for the musical jingle to conclude. The difficulty of the recipe doesn't matter to the stat, so you can just buy a bajillion medicinal herbs and upgrade them to strong herbs 2,000 times at the start of the game for the accolade. A better strategy, though, is to make tons of ear cozies, or if you have over 250,000 gold, gold mails. You can buy each of the ingredients at the following places on screen. These items are special because selling them nets you a profit. This is great because it helps tremendously with our next entry. Banking 10 million gold. It's not a thing that you're going to do naturally, and this is a game where cash is a pain to acquire. Your best bet, apart from the aforementioned alchemy strategy, is finding a grotto where a bunch of gem slimes spawn and decimating them. I do have an issue with gem slimes though, namely how rare they are. They have on average a 10% chance to spawn in the best case scenario. As a result, my preferred method is grinding low-level legacy bosses as they drop 2,500 gold and items on top of that. I'll explain the mechanic later, but I'll throw an explanation on screen for those wanting grinding tips. Pause to read it. Defeating every monster in the game. What makes this a real headache is that first, you have to go out of your way to encounter many monsters on the overworld. As an example, beaches tend to contain different monsters than the mainland, and the same applies to forested areas and such. If you're missing a monster, it can be a bit like trying to find a needle in a haystack. You also need to complete a bunch of quests with exclusive monsters. That's not the rough part though, as a ton of monsters are exclusive to Grottoes. Without getting too into their mechanics, the gist of why it's tough is every grotto has a starting monster rank and is one of 5 themes. Both determine what monsters can appear in them. Monster ranks 9 through 12 are basically just grotto-exclusive monsters. The annoying part is you can't see the monster rank directly, you've gotta infer what it is by looking at a guide and seeing what monsters appear. Also, the 5 types of grotto do not appear equally. Ruins appear 40% of the time, caves 30% of the time, then fire, water, and ice each have a 10% chance of generating. So basically, you need to roll a 10% chance for 3 of these, then hope the grotto also has a high enough monster rank for the ones you're missing to appear. If it didn't, then you've got to clear the highest level grotto you can to try and get another high-ranking one to spawn. Which means clearing a 10+ floor random dungeon, and maybe also leveling up your hero to improve your odds of better grottos generating. It's all a huge pain, but also kind of inevitable to achieve, since our next accolade requires completing 1,000 grottos, which is an extraordinarily tedious task that requires trekking through randomly generated dungeons. There's 2 factors that prevent this from being worse, however. Recompleting a grotto counts for the stat, and legacy boss grottos count. Again, I'll get into what legacy grottos are later, but just know they're required for harder accolades. The next couple I'm grouping together, which is fitting because they're tied to multiplayer. Tag 1,000 players, and have 1,000 hours of playtime in multiplayer. That translates to 42 days. There's one for general playtime, but obviously you'll get that if you get the multiplayer one, so it's redundant. If you're a purist about things and you don't live in Japan, these accolades may as well be impossible. Even then, this game is over a decade old, so your odds still aren't great, but at least you stand a chance there. If you're willing to bend the rules, then it's possible to get a second DS and play with yourself while also deleting the other DS's tag 999 times over. A miserable experience, sure, but not necessarily difficult. And playtime just involves a lot of idling and charging devices. So here's where the accolades really become difficult, and also come with some interesting caveats. Completing all quests. And before you can even get a shot at doing this in 2025, you've got to find a way to access the game's now-defunct Wi-Fi features. Alternatively, you can play multiplayer with a file that accessed the online features when they were live, but that's extraordinarily unlikely, because otherwise, you can't access any of the DLC quests, which locks you out of 64 side quests and more, including a ton of actual post-game story content, which is fortunately denoted as such on a new extra quest list. I do recommend checking those out if you haven't, they're pretty awesome. Accessing this content is surprisingly easy on both an actual DS and emulator. I'll link a video in the description, plus the corner of the screen right now showing how to do so. This is absolutely required for 100%, so no way around it forever, even if you do have that multiplayer save. As for the quests themselves, this could be an entire video of its own, but despite bearing the name Dragon Quest, this game's side quests are agonizingly tedious. Like, here's an example. Critical Appraisal requires you to enrage a monster by whistling at it, where you'll quickly learn different monsters are more or less susceptible to the status through much trial and error. Then, also learn you can't just use a skill that guarantees a critical hit. It has to be all natural, which is great because they have like a 5% chance to trigger. No, I'm not still angry over it. Why do you ask? Most aren't as bad as that, but usually still involve something tedious like successfully steal from a certain monster 5 times, or kill this enemy with poison damage 2 times. With 184 quests in all, there's bound to be other nightmares in the mix. The rewards are often not the best either. Again, not all of them have bad rewards, some are awesome, but there's nothing worse than clearing a slog of a quest just to get a useless alchemy ingredient. By the end of the quest list, you'll probably be begging for it to end already. Which can be said about what's to come too, because unfortunately, there's 4 more accolades I consider even worse than completing all quests. The next 3 are my S tiers in a tentative easiest to hardest order. I'm cheating a bit for this first one. I'm putting an entire category of accolades here, namely the cosplay ones. They're a really cute category honestly, and reveal some pretty interesting facts about all of the game's pieces of equipment. Like, did you know each equipable item has a style stat associated with it? You can't see it on items directly, but if you check the status of your party, you can view the style points of a character. Style gets added to your charm, which is a stat that indicates how likely you are to stun, paralyze, or confuse an enemy with your good looks. It's a nice passive bonus, and it actually runs even deeper than that. There's categories of style allocated to each equipable item, which you have no way to view. The categories are as follows: Vanity, Allure, Aloof, Naive, Casual, and Cheek. Their only purpose is to trigger 6 different accolades, one for meeting a high value in each of the hidden stats. It's a weird inclusion, and even weirder that the developers went to the trouble of assigning these values to all equipment. But that wasn't even the cosplay accolades, that was just a tangent. The least bad ones are just cute, harmless fun that rewards players with a keen eye. If you dress up exactly as a vocation's official artwork, you'll get an accolade for it. These are all items you can get from shops, quests, or some intermediate alchemy. The second category of cosplay accolades is where the issues start. They all involve the use of cosplay equipment pieces, ones that all require the game's Wi-Fi services. After accessing them for the first time, you can visit 23 different special guests, which each have costume pieces to reward you with. If you wear all of them at once, you get an accolade. To get all the items, you need to complete a certain post-game quest, visit all of them on your birthday, have a fully upgraded inn, and/or talk to them as a certain class. And if you don't know, fully upgrading your inn requires tagging 30 different players. So if you can't tag that many naturally, the only alternative is taking a second DS and copy of the game, then creating a new save to play up to Stornoway 30 times. Each run takes about 45 minutes, so that's about 20 to 30 hours of grinding if you want to do it semi-legitimately. If you're on an emulator, the only way I know of is using a save file editor to set your unique tagged guests to 30. It has some other perks too, so it at least wouldn't be for just the costume pieces. Also, this is where the fact that many pieces of equipment are sex-specific become an issue. Men aren't allowed to wear skirts, and women aren't allowed to wear, dude stuff. This is why male heroes can't get 413 accolades like women, because you can only partially circumvent this with an accessory. There are still a couple funny exceptions. So easy, just go get the NB emblem and call it a day, right? Well, it's the revocation accessory for the minstrel class, so you gotta get to level 99 in a garbage vocation to get it. Great, time to massacre metal slimes. Okay, that was really annoying and very tedious, but still not the worst. What is the worst is our third category of this category, the hero cosplays. All of these are dropped by Legacy Grotto bosses, which work differently from normal grottos. Each Legacy Grotto map is obtained through a unique means, usually completing a post-game quest or defeating another Legacy Grotto boss a bunch. Instead of being randomly generated dungeons, a Legacy Grotto has just one floor that contains a boss and nothing else. They are all antagonists from past Dragon Quest games, and you can choose to level them up every time you beat them, in exchange for you getting no experience. As they level up, their drops will change and they grow much stronger. As you can imagine, all of the hero cosplay items come from these twerps. Based on my calculations, and assuming you have the absolute best luck imaginable, you'd need to defeat these bosses at least 584 times to get all of the items. Realistically, it'll be in the 600s or higher though. For at least 6 of these bosses, you'll fight them at least 69 times. Nice. Meaning they'll also become crazy difficult, far more powerful than absolutely any other enemy in the entire game. In case of one, you actually need to fight them 81 times, so that's fun. This will be a bit of a running trend, but there is actually a way to make this a lot faster and easier. Kind of. You can just buy this equipment from DQVC, which is a Wi-Fi exclusive shop that rotates through 52 different categories weekly, so one for each week in a year. Technically just 50 though, since there's 2 blink weeks for some reason. We're interested in 2 weeks called Heroes of History, which have all of the hero cosplay items for sale. The store rotates in real time though, so have fun waiting up to a year for that, depending on when you start, since the first Heroes of History lineup appears on week 39, and the second on week 42. So it'll still take an extremely long time one way or another. It's just a matter of how actively you want to work for it. The items also cost a ton of gold, so make sure you're loaded before the week rolls around. The online store is also where a lot of other costume items can be obtained, which are a subcategory of equipment items that usually don't have great stats and are just for vanity purposes. Of course, without vanity slots, you have to sacrifice your actual armor to wear them, so they're a bit lame. There's a mind-boggling number of them though, and quite a few are clothes worn by main characters in the story, or general festive outfits like Santa's outfit. I actually had no idea they existed until making this video. So, how can the Accolades get any worse than that? Well, I mentioned it earlier, but in this game, you can revocate a class at level 99. This grants a one-time accessory dependent on the vocation, and if it's the hero, it buffs Grotto level generation. So, okay, it's revocating once for each class? Reaching level 99 12 times is pretty bad. No. I desperately wish that were so, because that is far easier to face than the cruel reality we live in, because there's an extra accolade for revocating a vocation 10 times. Oh, sorry, I forgot the plural. I meant accolades. In other words, you need to reach level 99 120 times. What is this? Disgaea? That's insane! Impractical! Why? Worth mentioning here is that different classes require varying amounts of experience. The lowest is Martial Artist, requiring 4.2 million experience, and the highest is the Sage at 5.2 million experience. So, based on my lazy math, you need around 550 million XP to get this accolade. There are some things we can do to make this easier though. First, get rid of every party member. The hero's the only person who can get the accolades, so revocating the other members is pointless. Plus, this means the hero will get every last of experience, effectively quadrupling your XP gain. Of course, it's offset by defeating enemies way slower, but trust me, this is the best way to do things. You want to spear or axe on them for the Thunder Thrust / Hatchet Man skill, since it has a 50% chance to inflict a crit, which ignores defense, allowing you to instantly kill metal slimes. Raise agility all the way with a Meteorite Bracelet, and try to maximize your charm and style stats to hopefully stun the slimes. Some SP restoring gear will help too. A Goddess Ring in place of the Meteorite Bracelet might be a good idea. Finally, equip the Elevating Shoes. They give plus 5% experience gain. It'll save you a few dozen hours in the long run. So maybe it's not that bad. The best metal slimes give a lot of experience, right? Yeah, they do actually. 240,000 in fact. You'd only need to kill 18 of them to get a Martial Artist to level 99. The issue is, Platinum Jewel slimes suck. Like most metal slimes, they're rare and flighty. On top of that, these guys are outrageously fast. So much so, you can really only outspeed them if you're already a high level, which defeats the entire point. They only appear in the absolute hardest grottos where a single person would get obliterated, especially at a low level, and they usually just appear on their own, which makes their XP yield pretty redundant. So the seemingly best option is really just a rare bonus when grotto hunting, rather than a reliable grinding method. Well, what's the second best metal slime then? King Metal Slimes. They yield 120,000 XP, half of a PJK, which is still really good. You'd only need 35 to max a Martial Artist, and they don't have as many downsides as their seniors. Of course, there's still a catch though. First, they're only found in grottos in very specific types, so you've got to hunt 1 million of them to even begin grinding them. Second, the enemies there are seriously tough. Not a deal breaker, but it complicates things trying to go from level 1 to 99 with a single character. Third, they don't appear in big groups. This is an issue because the third most lucrative option is the Liquid Metal Slime. They are worth 40,000 XP per pop, so you need 105 of them to max a Martial Artist. You can first encounter them during the story in the Bowhole, but that's not a good spot for grinding them. We're interested in an easily accessible post-game area called Slime Hill. It's near Angel Falls, and at this point the only enemies that spawn are the various slimes you encountered during the story. This includes liquid metal slimes. What's more is they can spawn in huge groups, although that doesn't change their rare and flighty. But there's a very specific reason I'm highlighting these fellas. There's an easy trick you can use to guarantee monster spawns. It's phenomenal, and I believe it to be the best grinding method. Even then, killing over 13,000 of the jerks won't happen overnight. As a disclaimer, I think it's possible to use the trick on King Metal Slimes, but I absolutely could not get it to work on them no matter what I tried. But anyways, the method is achieved by using grotto maps to manipulate RNG to guarantee metal slime spawns. Here's how you do it. Enter the cave on Slime Hill, open your treasure maps. Look at the name of the bottommost map. That's what determines the seed. Now close the screen, exit the cave. Walk straight down. As you collide with the cliff, walk straight right, then walk up right. 3 monsters should have spawned and will always spawn if you followed the steps correctly. Make sure you're walking a completely consistent path. If you didn't get a liquid metal slime to spawn, you know that map was a bad seed and you have a few options. First, I recommend sorting your maps differently by pressing select, as the game remembers your sorting type. After exhausting those options, you can try changing pages, but remember you'll have to do that every single reset if it works. If that doesn't work, or you just want to make sure your map is on the first page, you can try deleting a map to adjust the order. Earning a new map works too, but that obviously takes a lot more time. And if none of your maps spawn a slime with this method, you can try changing up your walk path when exiting the cave. All that matters is you are following a consistent path. So I suggest either holding down and right, just left, just right, or just down after exiting the cave. I only specified a path earlier because that one is easy to do and gets 3 monster spawns instead of 1. Any walk path can work as long as you repeat it consistently, so keep it dead simple. Also, do note it only guarantees one of that enemy. The support monsters that accompany it aren't included in the seed. But on Slime Hill especially, you're extremely likely to get multiple liquid metal slimes each encounter anyways. The seed is also based off the number of people in the party, so while one map may work for your party of 4, it won't work for just your hero. This method makes it the second most lucrative grinding strat in the game. The best is essentially a non-option though, as literally only like 14 grottos out of the billions of seeds have this bug, but there's grottos that only spawn Metal King slimes and no other enemies. There's also some that are for gold jewel slimes, but gold isn't as big a deal. These grottos are outrageously rare as their existence relies upon a generation bug. So unless you can get one from multiplayer, good freaking luck winning the grotto lottery. Our next accolade requires alchemizing all 470 recipes. This one will take a lot of explanation. Before you can even start gathering the materials for all this crap, you've got to find the recipes. They're scattered all over the world in bookshelves. So I hope you've diligently inspected every single bookshelf in every town, dungeon, and building across the world without fail. If not, flapping hop to it. This isn't strictly necessary, as there is a try your luck option with the Krak Pot, which lets you input ingredients without a recipe. But if you're planning on 100%ing a game as daunting as this, you really want to do every last thing possible to streamline the process. This reduces how often you're browsing wiki pages and navigating long menus after all. Next, you've got to actually make the stuff. And oh dear god, is that easier said than done with so many recipes. Most of the ingredients for alchemy can be obtained in one of 4 methods. Bought from shops, found in chests, scavenged on the overworld, or stolen from monsters. Unfortunately, few come from shops, so you're generally left with the 3 other options. The most accessible of these is scavenging items from specific spots in the world. It's genuinely a cool process learning where all of these are by exploring the map, and it becomes a lot easier in the post-game once you can fly the Starlight Express wherever you please. What sucks for us is you can't just fast-forward the console's clock to respawn items. There's also a really obscure mechanic where each save file has random forageables be rarer than others, meaning they respawn slower than normal. I don't know the details on it, but it's a quirk that complicates things just an extra bit. Point is, you can't cheese it much. Besides, with how many ingredients you're going to need for all this alchemy, scavenging alone isn't going to cut it. This is where Grottoes can come in to help with the 2 remaining methods. Opening blue treasure chests in Grottoes, and stealing from the monsters within them. The potential loot and monsters change depending on the rank of a grotto, which is a whole can of worms, but put simply, higher levels probably means higher ranks. Grottoes treasure chests always have random loot and respawn every time you reset a grotto by opening and closing the treasure map. So it's a decent method and rarely nets you some good equipment too. By and large though, you're gonna be stealing an astronomical amount of items for specific goods. So you want at least one level 99 ranger. Ideally more though, with a Thief's Revocation accessory to double your odds of successfully stealing. Hell, it's likely worth it to farm ultra rare deafness seeds to get at least one character to 999 deafness. Otherwise, the chances are going to be pretty miserable, and this entire process will suck even more. All that alone probably would have put alchemizing all recipes here on this list, but actually, it's much worse. Obtaining the ultimate pieces of equipment is a very special kind of hell. Before you can even take a crack at it, you need to obtain the pieces of equipment you'll upgrade with alchemy. Every last one of the armors is a 2% drop from a grotto boss, except the rank 12 one. So on average, you'll need to defeat 550 grotto bosses, which also means trekking thousands of floors of grottos to get the 11 legendary armors. The weapons are obtained similarly, as they are all 1% chance drops from rank 10 grotto chests, for 12 different weapons. Also, you can't directly tell what rank a grotto chest is, and you can get repeats, so have fun with that. What I've already described is a war crime, but unfortunately, there's even more to the equation. That was just how we obtained the most important ingredients. After all, this accolade is about alchemy, not acquiring equipment. How it works is 22 of these legendary items have 4 stages. Their base form, an upgraded one, a penultimate, and an alchemirical form. The latter 2 forms are what catapults this to insanity. To understand why, we gotta take a step back. The actual ingredients, apart from the initial legendary items anyways, are crazy expensive but doable. They require agates of evolution, which is basically every major alchemy ingredient mashed together. Then in addition to that, you need legacy boss orbs. These are rare drops from a legacy boss with increasing odds depending on the boss's level. Different bosses drop different color orbs, which correspond to certain legendary items. The first legendary upgrade costs 1 of each item, whereas the second takes 3, totaling to 4 per item. But remember when I said that dreaded word, alchemirical? How it works is when you try to alchemize the 3rd tier of legendary item, there's a 10% chance for an alchemical miracle to take place and produce the 4th tier of item. If this doesn't happen, you get the 3rd tier of item. Regardless of what happens, the game will forcefully save afterwards, so you cannot just save scum for the miracle. And you can't just upgrade a 3rd tier to a 4th tier. Instead, you have to convert your tier 3 legendary back to a tier 1 item to get another shot, which is required, as that counts as an alchemy recipe. So if you get an alchemirical first try, you'll miss out on the 3rd tier legendary item and the 1st tier being added to your alchemy log, which is a maddeningly evil caveat that makes a seemingly good luck a death sentence for a completionist. Almost like charity fraud. There are some things that make this process much less arduous. If you can connect to Wi-Fi, then DQVC sometimes sells the 1st stage legendary items, which is a gargantuan help. You can also increase your chances of succeeding at an alchemirical by up to 30%, for a 40% chance of success. Of course, add a catch. Each item scales with a particular stat. There's a threshold where meeting 533 increases your odds to 20%, 766 to 30%, and 999 to 40%. They only increase the odds at those thresholds, so if you're only 532 strength, you're too short for the 20% ride. These stat totals are so high though, that you can only achieve the higher 2 through the use of stat seeds. Otherwise, you'll be capped at 20% odds at best at level 99, as stats plateau around 500. But with max skill points and good equipment, reaching 766 in a stat is possible for some without seeds. Farming stat seeds is a whole other can of worms involving stealing from specific enemies, but potentially worth it in this case. If done early enough, it could kill 2 birds with 1 stone if you focused on deafness. Are you still with me? No? Well, good, because we're about to talk about RNG manipulation to speed things up. Namely by using a technique dubbed the Hoimi table. Here's my interpretation of how it works. This isn't required, but I suggest having a level 65 or higher priest. First, pull up Yab's Hoimi table calculator on a nearby device. Get your party to low health, go to the Grotto boss floor or Krak Pot, quick save, and also turn off your DS. Once it's back on and the save loaded, look at the magical mending value of your healer. Put it in the tool. Then you need to use heal on characters 6 times, and write how much their health changed into the tool. It doesn't matter who you heal as long as they don't reach full HP. So if you need to heal another party member to avoid fully healing them, that's fine. Just make sure you adjust the new starting HP. After doing this 6 times, click on the available seed. If there's multiple, you need to do another heal to narrow it down. Depending on what device you're playing with, you may always get the same seed from this. If that's the case, in future you can skip discovering the seed, and go straight to the table on this webpage with a bookmark. You still need to start the process with the quick save and system reset though. Please let me know in the comments if that's wrong though, and I'll note it in the pinned mistakes, which you should check if you're using me as a guide. But anyways, click on the seed. You'll see a table of squares. You're on the square that corresponds with how many times you healed. So if you healed 6 times, you're on 6. -1. It starts from 0, so actually 6 heals puts you on column 5. It's got a black ring. You want to be on a space before a red square, which is indicated by the red outline square. Basically, your goal is to make the red outline overlap the red square. If you want an alchemiracle, overlap the blue outline with a blue square. So if column 10 contains a red square, we would cast heal 3 times, placing us on column 9. But your red square is probably really far away and takes dozens of heals to reach. You can speed things up by casting multi-heal to move ahead 4 tiles, and omni-heal to move 8. It doesn't matter if the spell's actually cast, and in fact, I recommend starting with multi-heal to hit full HP on the party, so you avoid wasting MP casting omni-heal. If your device has a consistent Hoimi seed, and you skip straight to the table, you will instead start on the very first tile, and your objective is to make the black outline overlap the desired outcome, not the colored outlines. So in my case, when I load a quick save after restarting the game, since my first tile is less than 5%, I'm guaranteed to get legacy orb drops and alchemiracles without needing to heal. If I want a legendary equipment drop from a Grotto boss, I cast Omni-Heal exactly 5 times and it'll drop. Now you can go fight the boss, and you're free to do so however you like. The only exception is you cannot use a coup de grace, or kill a regular enemy like in the Shogun fight. If you were successful, the boss is guaranteed to yield their 2% chance drop. This technique also works for alchemiracles. So overall, this entire process is far more survivable with appropriate RNG manipulation. Still utterly insane, but not so much you can make alchemizing every DQ9 item some kind of prison sentence. I mean, I guess you still could, that would take years, but... And as a quick side note, a lot of the supposedly ultimate equipment sucks ass. How defense works in this game is it's just every 4 points of it removes 1 damage taken. So without special effects, stronger armor usually has diminishing returns. And a surprising amount of these legendary pieces have either no special effects or bad ones. The gauntlets are especially funny because you can get what is essentially the best pair as soon as you reach Gleba, the ethereal gloves. They give 15 defense and 10% damage reduction to most magic. And the ultimate ones don't. They just have 30 defense and do nothing else. So not only is this stuff stupidly expensive, about half of it isn't even the best equipment in the game. And the entirety of the legendary weapons are outclassed by the Falcon Blade, which you can buy infinitely in the postgame. The only exception is the poorly named critical fans, for increasing the chance of a coup de grace each turn. But they still can't compete in terms of damage. But I promise you still don't understand how bad this is, and won't even after I tell you what each agate of evolution requires. This equates to obtaining every last item in this graphic I've illustrated, all of this, multiplied by 179. So those items you need 12 of? Yeah, you'll need over 2,000 of them. Also, note some ingredients, namely the 50,000G Chrono Crystal, have to be purchased, and that'll total to 9.33 million gold. The rest of the ingredients will have to be stolen from enemies to achieve in such a large volume. And items only stack to 99, so you can't do this in one big trip either, which means stealing and alchemizing stuff bit by bit instead of all at once, because this was already such a fast process. So just take that all in, the hundreds, if not thousands of hours of grinding that entails. And of course, there's the orbs too. The best drop odds for each is 15% upon defeating a level 91 legacy boss. So I'm just going to guesstimate you need to defeat a legacy boss 7 times to get 1 orb. 7 times 179 is 1,253. So, does the scale of the task finally register with you? Has your confidence been razed to ashes by this merciless grind? Do you comprehend the horrors I have witnessed and am now forced to inflict upon you in order to cope with this unrelenting mental burden? So anyways, once again, you can trivialize things by using DQVC. Week 51 is called Orbsum, and it lets you buy all 6 orbs, ethereal stones, Lucida shards, and chronocrystals. That only leaves equipment, astral plumes, and sage elixirs for agates of evolution, but you can at least nab 99 of those from prior weeks to halve the workload. Or at least I assume you can. DQVC is special in that, unlike most stores, it has limited stock. Since it's based on real time, I can't test that, and this feature is already poorly documented. But this may be far less overpowered than it seems as a result. Still, it's absurd how much you can possibly skip with this shop. It almost makes me wonder why they even bothered with this insane alchemy table. And yes, the Hoimi table also works on orbs, so that massively cuts down on legacy boss kills if you don't like the DQVC route. Throw in the Thief's Theory scroll for more drops. With alchemy finished, we have the final accolade left. Or rather 2 accolades, because I'm cheating and lumping them together. I thought they were the same accolade when writing and recording the next section, but collecting all items and all equipment are actually separate accolades. So just laugh at past Connor so we can avoid another 6-month gap in my upload schedule. Thanks. How can it be any more miserable than what I've described? Well, by doing all of them, of course. Kind of. Collecting all items is the closest we get to an accolade of that nature, so it wins the misery contest by default. Call it a cop-out if you want, but collecting every single item means beating tons of quests, revocating in each class at least 1 time, alchemizing most items, defeating legacy bosses hundreds if not thousands of times, and a whole lot of other random crap too. Granted, DQVC can bypass chunks of that, but you also need it for a bunch of exclusive items, like Santa outfits and pumpkin heads, which can mean months of just waiting for the store to rotate to what you need. So even though it doesn't entail reaching level 99 120 times as well, it asks enough of the other awful things for me to consider this the single hardest accolade in the game. And I know I said I'd focus on accolades in this video, but I just want to very quickly note another thing that you could consider a part of 100% completion. The monster list entries. You unlock a second page of text and reveal all possible item drops on them after using the Thief's Eye for Trouble skill on a monster for the first time. The sole reason I'm bringing this up is because you can permanently miss entries if you don't use the skill on an enemy's only appearance. At least side quest ones anyways. Technically, multiplayer allows do-overs, but that's easier said than done. It's just immensely cruel to me that there's something close to permanently missable with all these crazy accolades. None of this makes Dragon Quest IX a bad game. Like I said at the start, I freaking adore the thing. It's just clear there's a focus in this game on maximizing playtime with the quest and accolade design for those unfortunate enough to fall to its thrall. If you can play the game without getting sucked into the insanity of 100%ing it, you'll have a good time. Honestly, doing like a 95% playthrough could even be fun depending on your tastes, especially since there's lots of options on how to complete them. Do you want to get it done quick? Then use RNG manipulation, DQVC, and pick and choose your goals. Otherwise, you can buckle down and do everything like a purist. I can see value in most of the accolades, and if it helps at least one person feel fulfilled, then I guess it was worth adding. There's a Giant Bomb article about someone who did 100% the game in 2011. but not according to my definition, which is obtaining every accolade. Still, they brewed every alchemy recipe, collected every item, and killed every monster, which took 773 hours, so it gives a sense of the scope of the task. I don't mean to dismiss Steve Tolin's achievement. What he did is still crazy impressive and took insane dedication, especially on real hardware. Massive props to him. I'm just a pedant with a stick up his ass. Apart from that, I couldn't find accounts from anyone who's 100% at the game, so I'd love to hear from anyone who has or seriously attempted to. How long did it take you? What kinds of strategies did you use? And was I off the mark with mine? What was your most and least favorite part? It's an experience very few truly have seen to the end. It'd be fascinating to hear about. If you want to play this game for the first time or replay it, then I suggest checking out what MelonDS emulator has to offer. Like I said earlier in the video, it's a way to access defunct Wi-Fi features quite easily, and obtaining and installing the emulator itself is also crazy simple. It's got multiplayer functionalities and some nice options for better 3D rendering. You've been seeing the improved rendering as I've been using it to make the game presentable on a huge computer screen for the video. Otherwise, it'd look like this. Which just goes to show how badly this game needs a remake. Hey, this started off as a video just compiling trivia to justify me getting sucked into this game on a replay, but instead ended up spawning a fun series idea. I have other games in mind for future videos, but feel free to suggest more. As always, I'd appreciate it if you could support me on Ko-fi so I can feed myself and put your name in the credits, but regardless, have a good day or night, viewer.